Watkins, Romeo Dobbs. We got Jayden Reed is going to come back at some point. So they have guys that they can get the ball to that are going to be able to create for them. And now with Tucker Kraft out, they can now scheme up more ways to get these wide receivers more involved.
We're taking a look at Tucker Kraft again, on pace to have one of the better seasons from a tight end perspective. It'll be interesting to see if Green Bay does anything here on Tuesday. We certainly know that Harry Roseman's been busy this week, and this morning, Jalen Phillips this morning, that comes on the heels of Jair Alexander on Saturday, Michael Carter II last week. JJ, just sort of give us the landscape of the Philadelphia bye week so far.
So Philly went into the trade deadline area of the calendar, if you will, knowing that they needed cornerback help and edge rush help. You know, Howie Roseman, I think, is one of the best ever at what he does. He also, you know, sees what we all see. We all watch the Philadelphia Eagles week in, week out. We may not watch the Seattle Seahawks week in, week out. We watch the Eagles. It has been clear since week one they needed another corner, outside corner, right opposite Quinyon Mitchell, and it was clear that their best pass rushers were on different teams or were retired. And so they bring back Brandon Graham, and when they brought him back, we told you, they're not done at pass rusher. The corner was always going to be really hard to find. They hope that it's probably going to be Michael Carter more than Jair Alexander. That's a late round pick swap. Jair Alexander, it may not work out. The Eagles are very aware of that. But this Jalen Phillips deal, they needed a pass rusher because their defense under Vic Fangio has not been working because they can't effectively rush the passer. So guys are kind of playing out of position. They're not being maximized, right? Zach Bond was an all-pro last year, in large part because of what the guys up front were allowing him to do, allowing him to be more free. And so now when you get that pass rush, that's going to help your back seven. And so they invest a third-round pick in Jalen Phillips. You know, Miami's going to be paying down a large portion of his remaining contract. So that's essentially what the Eagles did. Most teams were probably pegging a fourth-round pick, maybe a fifth for Jalen Phillips. You can buy up, right? And so that's what the Philadelphia Eagles ultimately did with the Miami Dolphins. They get their pass rusher. I would be very surprised if there's any more deals to be done coming out of Philly. I think they've done all of their trade deadline deals, with the last one, of course, being this morning getting Jalen Phillips.
Yeah, and I think this is a good deal for both. I think if you're the Miami Dolphins, you have a third-round pick, then it gives you another opportunity to get a player in the top 100 in next year's draft class. But if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you are now reuniting Vic Fangio with Jalen Phillips. Mm-hmm. But you also put Jalen Phillips in a space where he doesn't have to be the full-time guy. And what I mean by that is he doesn't have to play every single down. You can create packages for him, use him off the edge in some third-down situations, walk him over guards, and play that spinner-type role where you can move him around and create those matchups for him, because they do need some help off the edge, and we know that. And the next big thing from there is, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, now you get to decide on if you want to extend him for the foreseeable future. And something that Lige Douzable brought up on the morning show this morning was, if you don't, and Jalen Phillips ends the season statistically doing well and he gets paid somewhere else, then now you get a compensatory pick in 2027 for Jalen Phillips if you're the Philadelphia Eagles.
Before we pivot to Miami, Rand, let me just throw it back at you in terms of what JJ said, trying to find someone opposite of Quinyon Mitchell. So you have Michael Carter II, you have Jair Alexander. What's the realistic expectation when you make these moves? Are these dart throws? Is there a real expectation that you can find someone if you've made these trades?
Well, typically when you're making these type moves, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles or, you know, teams like the Baltimore Ravens that have done it, you're making these moves because you figure you're that one piece away from completing your team and being able to make that push down the stretch. And so when you bring in a player like Jair Alexander or Michael Carter, you're understanding that I'm bringing in this guy that is going to be able to settle this spot, at least for the rest of this season. Now, the future will get there when we get there, but you're making these moves to kind of complete the picture for you for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's interesting from Alexander's perspective. 2 games played, more healthy scratches really than he did for a Baltimore team. So we'll keep tabs on that. You brought up the Dolphins. No more Chris Grier. They parted ways. Jalen Phillips already on the move. I know Darren Waller was on the table before he got hurt. Jalen Waddle, the whole part here. What's the landscape looking like from a Miami perspective heading into Tuesday's deadline, JJ?
So we had always anticipated whether Chris Grier was going to be the general manager or not, the way that the season was going for the Dolphins. It just made good business sense to ultimately part with a pass rusher. It was either going to be Jalen Phillips or Bradley Chubb. A lot of folks around the league thought that Bradley Chubb would be the player that they would part with more easily because he has a base salary around $1.2 million. An acquiring team would just have to absorb about half of that underneath the salary cap. Jalen Phillips, the better player. And so we see that Jalen Phillips is on his way out. Well, now that Chris Greer is no longer there, could we potentially see with interim GM Champ Kelly making a deal that sends Bradley Chubb on his way, that both pass rushers would leave Miami? It was a possibility before. I don't know that I would call it necessarily a likelihood right now, but certainly strongly possible that Bradley Chubb winds up getting dealt to a pass rush needy team by tomorrow's deadline. The fact of the matter is there are a lot of teams, there are more buyers than sellers when it comes to pass rushers. And so you can acquire Bradley Chubb probably for a 5th or a 6th round pick, right, Rand? That would be the guy that I would keep my eye on. I think a lot of folks around the league think that Matthew Judon will probably get released, and so they probably wouldn't trade for him. It would probably just be a conditional 7th if you wanted to go after him and get him. And lastly, Jalen Waddle, because, Tommy, you mentioned him. Is it possible that the Miami Dolphins deal him? Sure, insofar as anything under the sun is possible, but it just does not seem likely, has not seemed likely, and that is why we have been saying for some time that he's not going to get dealt, because the Dolphins still want to try to look somewhat effective offensively, and trading away your top receiver after Tyreek Hill is out for the year and perhaps his career when he is under contract through his 20s is not the best way to team build if you are the Miami Dolphins and interim GM Champ Kelly.
Rand, what do we think in terms of Miami?
Well, I think the hard part right now is you don't have your GM in Chris Greer because they moved on with him, and now Champ Kelly enters as the interim GM. And so it's a weird situation to be in because now it's like whatever trades you're making are towards the future of this franchise, and we don't know if Champ Kelly is going to be the future GM there. So who's actually making these calls? And so you don't know if it's the team president, you don't know if it's the owner making these calls. Now, I know I'm going to assume from an evaluation standpoint and value of the player, Champ Kelly and his staff are doing that part, but whose ultimate call is it to move on from guys at this point? Is it the owner? Is it the president? We don't know. And so for me, when it comes to talking about guys like Jalen Waddle, that's where it gets kind of murky because no matter what you do moving forward in terms of your GM, your head coach, you're going to want to surround whoever coming in, in those positions with key players to build around, and Jalen Waddle is one of those.
So let's continue to lean into your expertise from a front office perspective. Talk about the Saints right now. They just made the quarterback change to Tyler Shuck. They're not having the season, obviously, that they had hoped for, but given the realistic expectations of this team, there's still questions on offense, potentially offloading guys like Alvin Kamara, who says he wants to stay, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave. What's the situation in terms of your outlook of the Saints right now?
Yeah, those three names are the names that come up the most. And I don't think they move on from Alvin Kamara because I think he's just such a mainstay of not only the New Orleans Saints organization, but that city as a whole. And Chris Olave, when he's healthy, when he's out there, he's explosive and he's a dynamic downfield threat. But the guy I think that they'll be more inclined to move on from is Rashid Shaheed. He's a guy that's battled some injuries. Now, when he's in there, he's just as explosive and he provides value from a special team return standpoint. But for me, he will be a free agent at the end of the season and may not return because he may be looking for a big payday that I'm sure the New Orleans Saints may not want to pay him. So why not be able to get something now to continue to build around this quarterback and have picks for the future? Excuse me.
So we've kind of entered the chat portion where we're talking about teams that could potentially sell, teams that don't have good records. That would include the Tennessee Titans. JJ, what about Tennessee right now?
So they remain where they have been for the last couple of weeks, as we have been reporting. Really, any player the south of Jeffrey Simmons can be traded for with the Tennessee Titans. And so, again, I do believe it behooved the Titans to wait until now because, of course, they need as much talent as they can to attempt to win as many games as possible. I know that we all look at Tankathon and, what the Titans could get in the draft and all that. These guys are out there trying to win games. And that's from the front office to the coaching staff, obviously, certainly the players. But now that there are no more games left to be played until the trade deadline, I think the Titans continue to be open for business. And again, we just talked about it. there are more buyers than sellers when it comes to pass rushers and defensive linemen. And so T'Vondre Sweat is a guy that the Titans have gotten calls on. Will they move him? We'll see. Arden Key has been the name that I've been saying for weeks as the most likely to be moved, that the Titans could part with him. Again, we'll see what winds up happening. In terms of fire sale, no, I don't think any team is necessarily fire selling because you just don't have 5-6 players that you can trade right now. That's not realistic in the NFL. But 2 more guys, maybe 3. I mean, that's pushing it. But that could happen in Tennessee. Certainly look at pass rusher and defensive line.
JJ, what about the Jets? I know a couple of defensive players could be on the move, but also Breece Hall could fix a lot of contending backfields if he is dealt.
He could, if he's dealt. I think the Jets think that Breece Hall can help their backfield. I think the Jets think that Jermaine Johnson can help their pass rush. And so, again, I'm loath to repeat the phrase like anything could happen. If somebody blows them away with an offer, all of those sort of couched caveats that you hear around trade deadline. But that is what you're talking about with the Jets. Otherwise, I think the Jets are very, very content hanging on to both of those players. Could we see someone down the roster ultimately get dealt from the Jets? Sure. But if you're talking about names necessarily, like a Breece Hall or a Jermaine Johnson, right now it definitely seems like the Jets will be hanging on to them.
And then lastly for you, Rand, the Raiders, what are you thinking about Jacoby Myers, who way early in the process had wanted out of town already in terms of the biggest perspective?
Well, he would be the one guy that you would be prepared to move on from. And to quote Mike Tomlin, we want volunteers, not hostages, right? And it's been that situation. And when a player comes out and just, categorically says, hey, I don't want to be here. And so for me, instead of having that guy in the locker room and around the program, especially at a time in which we're trying to build and we're struggling, it's best that you move on and allow him to go to a place or a situation where he wants to be. Now, I will say it was encouraging to see him out there yesterday. I believe I saw him out there just watching all the games that were on. But he is a guy that I think teams will call on just because of his reliability in terms of being a pass catcher, and specifically for some of these quarterbacks, a route runner that will be where he's supposed to be and be reliable catching the ball. So he'll be a guy that'll be on the move and probably wouldn't only cost you a late round pick, a 6th, 7th pick swap type situation. But Jacoby Myers will be the name there for Vegas. All
right, we will continue to keep tabs ahead of that Tuesday 4 p.m. Eastern deadline. Our thanks to Jonathan Jones and Rand Carthon.
Bây giờ mình làm bông hoa gì á? Con